You're tuned in to the Nonprofit Chatter, brought to you by Nonprofit Pro with our friends at Pursuant. Nhu Te and Taylor Shanklin are getting real and sitting down with nonprofit leaders to chatter about issues affecting nonprofits today. Be sure to subscribe to us in your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss these conversations with your nonprofit peers. And check us out on the web at nonprofitpro.com/podcast/nonprofit-chatter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nonprofit Chatter podcast, hosted by me, Nhu Te, Editor-in-Chief of Nonprofit Pro.
And me, Taylor Shanklin, VP of Marketing at Pursuant.
The Nonprofit Chatter will give you an insider's look on the most pressing challenges facing nonprofit leaders and fundraisers today. And we talk about how nonprofits can overcome those challenges. In each episode, we will engage in invigorating conversation with industry leaders and find out what tools and tactics nonprofits need in their repertoire to help their vision become a reality. In episode number 9 of the Nonprofit Chatter, we're going to talk about why it's so important to focus your nonprofit around community. In this episode, we'll be joined by our very own Taylor Shanklin and also Craig Comins, VP of Development and Communications at Family Reach. Taylor and Craig, thanks so much for joining us on the Nonprofit Chatter. I'm really looking forward to diving into community building. How are you both doing?
Doing swell.
Doing fantastic.
So great to hear. So before we get started, Craig, can you take a few minutes and tell us more about Family Reach?
Absolutely, and thanks for Nhu and Taylor for having me on the Nonprofit Chatter. As you said, I am the Vice President of Development and Communication at Family Reach. Family Reach is a national nonprofit based in Boston, which focuses on alleviating the financial burdens of cancer. What that means is so often when families get a diagnosis of cancer, all time and effort is focused on getting better, as it should be. What often happens, even with great insurance, the costs of treatment can be enormous. And for many families, it can practically wipe them out. Where Family Reach steps in is we help when things go sideways. We can help with a mortgage payment, a utility bill, food, when people have to make that choice of, well, do I buy food for my kids or do I pay for my prescription drugs? In many cases, that's the dire question that people have to answer. So Family Reach is there to step in. In addition to providing financial assistance, we also want to be right there with patients early on in their diagnosis to be able to help plan and hopefully prevent those financial burdens. We offer education and awareness. We have financial navigators that can help you through the system of insurance and costs, and give you a sense of what could be coming down the road, as well as we have the ability to offer pro bono financial planning to really put your affairs in order so you can stave off those financial issues. Our organization's been around for about 22 years, and it's really in the last couple of years that we've added these what we call wraparound services to be able to provide the services so people don't get into financial difficulty right from the start.
Great. Thank you for giving that info. And, I'm sure in your role, you have a lot of communications with the people surrounding your organization. So my first question for you, Craig, is I'd like to hear more about, building a community. Can you talk about how you've done this at your organization and what benefits the organization received from it?
Absolutely. So I really came upon this concept or recognized this concept actually in my prior role at the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, where I was for 10 years. And when I became head of their National Endurance Peer-to-Peer program, I was sort of introduced to the idea of community. Not that we necessarily recognized that it was there, but in terms of observing participants and their interaction with the organization, it became clear to me. So let me explain what that means. So we had an endurance program that brought a group of people together from all different backgrounds, different walks of life together for a 4-month training program to prepare to go to a great destination to run a half marathon, a marathon, Ironman event, what have you. Of these people that we brought together, 95% of them had a direct connection to the mission, whether they were a patient, a parent, spouse, family member, a friend to someone with one of our diseases. So they were very mission focused and very committed to finding a cure and raising funds for research. That's great. We see that all the time in events all types of events that we all do. Well, through this 4-month training program and weekly trainings and sometimes bi-weekly trainings, we saw that people just didn't run. They started to ask questions of each other. What symptoms have you had? What doctors does your child see? What do you think of this medication? And really the training sessions became almost like a quasi-support group. And over time, over those 4 months, you saw those relationships bond and grow. And then at the end of the 4 months, people would get on a plane, go to a great destination, meet up with other teams from other cities and parts of the country who have the exact same experiences, and you see relationships grow there over that long weekend of the event that had many different inspirational activities and obviously the race itself. But then the race would end, people would go home, and we really noticed that's where sort of the beauty of all this happened was those relationships didn't stop. People just didn't go back into their regular lives and with their regular friends and everything. They kept this group with them. They certainly the next weekend had withdrawal from not being able to go out and run together, so they would continue to run together, but they would start to do other things as well. And they weren't just talking about, you would see this on Facebook and on Instagram, they wouldn't just be having conversations about the event they did or the organization, they would have conversations about life. And over time, you then see them coming back and doing another event, or maybe doing a completely different event at the organization, or volunteering, or going to a gala, and over time that would even expand into people would be so engaged with the organization that they would join a board, or they would even become major donors. So that community formed around the event, but grew and became bigger than the event, all centered around the organization. So why is that important? So we talk often, I know you've had it on this podcast before, you've talked about conversational fundraising or relationship fundraising, that communication between the organization and the donor. Extremely important. We all need to do that. We all need to be good at that. But in the example that I gave of community, what happened was that conversation back and forth, organization to the participant was certainly there, but we saw participants having the conversation with each other. And all with the backbone of the organization sort of as the facilitator of those conversations. And we found by building that communication and that community that people had a stronger relationship overall with the organization. The retention for those events were better because of it, as well as the lifetime value of those individuals by staying longer, contributing longer, fundraising longer. They were more valuable to the organization over time.
Hey, Craig, it's Taylor. I love that you talked about how it's like you were the facilitator of creating a dialogue and creating that community.
Right.
And it's a cool example. It's one that resonates with me, having also done endurance events with an organization. And, this story that you're sharing takes me back to those days where we would have the trainings. We'd all be out there at the butt crack of dawn on a Saturday and like, oh, why am I doing this? But then you start getting into a friendship with the other participants and with the people who are working at the organization. And so it's like creating that space to get a dialogue going, not just between the organization and the participants or the organization and the donors, but between the participants themselves and the donors. It creates the sticky factor. That sounds like you guys really figured it out. So I think that if you're listening and you're thinking about how you create that sticky factor, think about all of the things that you are currently already doing where maybe you could build that sense of community and that opportunity for dialogue, similar to what you guys
Mhm.
did with that peer-to-peer program.
Right. And I can imagine some people listening might say, well, that's great. An endurance event brings people together because of that training, so it's easier. You know, I run a walk program, and that doesn't have a training aspect. So how do you do it in a walk environment? And I think while maybe not as easy, and yes, the endurance sort of platform lends itself to that, I still think you can create opportunities for people to get together. And it's not just, hey, we're having our launch kickoff and we'll be doing the walk in 6 weeks or 6 months or what have you. But I think you can create activities to bring people together and share and do things, fun activities. And these activities don't have to be focused on fundraising. They can just be on getting together and just doing things together, fun activities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see that with people doing like virtual events with, you know, you see this live stream video gaming fundraising. Like there's so many different ways to think about building that community that great point. It does not have to be around a training or a specific physical event. People connect in lots of different ways in this virtual world now. So I think it's about thinking outside the box and looking at what you've got and, okay, how could you build more dialogue in your current reality?
I also want to mention, if you're familiar with trends in the peer-to-peer world, you might know that endurance, for example, those numbers are down. Participation numbers are down over the last few years. It's just a natural thing that has happened. What we found during those down periods, our numbers were less from participants, but because of those that we could watch and see were very active and engaged in the community, we actually were able to see better fundraising out of them than those people that just sort of show up. They might come to a training, they go to the event, they don't really engage with their teammates, which happens, right? Not everybody tends to join this community, but those that did were better fundraisers, which helps you when your numbers are down. At least if you can bring in more dollars, you can maintain your levels.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I feel like nowadays with these peer-to-peer events, people become emotionally connected to an organization, not because of the activities that they're hosting, but really the people that are making an effort within the organization to learn about the participants, get them involved, and get them a part of this like strong community. And I feel like that's a trend that's emerging in the P2P space. And I think that's so important for a lot of nonprofits doing peer-to-peer fundraising to understand. And going with that leads us to our next question. You know, it seems like, you know, everyone understands the importance of building a community, but I think the idea gets lost among a lot of organizations.
Sure.
Why do you think nonprofits overlook the gesture of building a community around their organization, and how can they do better?
Yeah, I think it's really a factor of time and resources. So, right, I sometimes think if you looked up the definition of nonprofit in the dictionary, you would see something that said, you know, an organization that runs very lean, right? We all tend to have very lean organizations, and people sometimes have to play multiple roles. I don't think there are many nonprofits out there that would say they're overstaffed by any means. So the inclination then in that case is to say, okay, we need you to focus all your efforts on raising dollars, you know. And sometimes the idea of building community or adding activities, whatever they might be, that don't have a specific fundraising component, is like, oh, we can't spend the time on that. We have to spend our time and our dollars on doing something that's actually going to raise money. And that's, in this example, I think that's short-sighted in that building that community has to your word, Taylor, that stickiness that keeps people engaged and that helps people raise money. So, and I think if you look at it sort of looking at this in a slightly different context, when we look at major gifts and we look at the top of the pyramid and we utilize moves management and we have steps and activities and, a whole cultivation plan of how we deal with these major prospects, trying to get them to the point where we can make that major ask for them. This, in some respects, is almost like that engagement plan for your mid to low donors or supporters. It's those touch points that keep them engaged, that keep those conversations going, that keep them more engaged. And as I said early on, we noticed over time that we saw people not only continue to come back to the event, but also get involved in other parts of the organization. And we saw board chairs come out of the program, and we saw major donors come out of the program. So it was the program, in a sense, were those cultivation steps to get them to the point where they were major prospects. So I think looking at it in that context is just another reason why it's important.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. So totally agree with you, Craig, that I think it's a matter of resources and, little time, little money, all of that, right? The typical stuff that we all know and hear and vent about to each other when we see each other at a conference or something, or we talk on a podcast. I'll add on to that too. I think because of that, it's a mindset where the first point of focus is often on, we got this much money we got to raise, our numbers are down, and we just got to focus on some next bright, shiny acquisition program that's going to bring a lot more people in. And we often don't give ourselves the time or the energy to take a step back and think outside the box in how building community can actually bring, it could be your next acquisition program, right? So kind of like what you said is you end up finding major donors in it by building a community. I was reading this quote this morning and I really liked it, and I went and posted it on my Facebook page by Gabby Bernstein. She runs a podcast, and the quote is, "Give yourself permission to slow down. You can speed up by slowing down." And when we talk about building community, it's going to take time, but it's one of those things where if you take one day a month to just start thinking about how you could do this, or you set aside 30 minutes every Friday afternoon where you don't have maybe as many phone calls or something on a Friday, and you can think about how you would begin to build a community, I think that's one of the steps in moving forward to creating something like this that can actually create the stickiness, introduce you to new major donors, all of that stuff, when you have people centered around the communal aspect of things, as opposed to just being so myopically focused on the dollars you have to raise.
I think that's a great point. I also think it's somewhat similar to that. I think if you want to get a sense of what can work in this area, become involved with another organization. Be a volunteer or a donor or a participant at another organization and see what is, going back to that word sticky, what is sticky for you? What keeps you engaged? If it's nothing, then you need to add something, but often you can see how somebody else does it, and it sort of in a way validates the idea of building community for you.
Yeah, totally. I like that you use the word engaged. I like to often say engagement is the new metric that we need to all be focused on, not just clicks, not just, email opens, not just did you give the $25, but are you truly actively engaged? So when we think about building community, that's more focused around a metric of engagement overall in a more holistic way.
No, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, I think that is really important to understand, that the engagement of donors is probably more important and more long-term than just trying to get the dollars out of donors. So I like that correlation from you guys there. But this leads me to my last question of giving our listeners today some takeaways from our chat. Craig, can you share 3 practices nonprofit can add to their current strategy to begin building out a strong and well-connected community?
Sure. So I think first is you have to, I think is looking for and being open to those opportunities to build community, whether it's an event, whether it's a teleconference about a subject, whatever that might be. Look for those opportunities to bring people together, centered around, and not centered specifically around fundraising or another, but just about being together. So be open to that. I think it's a mindset, sort of back to what we were saying before. It's almost a mindset and just a regular practice that you do. So I would say that one, first one, be open and look for those opportunities. Second, and everyone should be doing this regardless, but it's all about the mission. Any activity ties in mission, whether it's a patient story, whether it's a video, what have you. Mission obviously is a binding factor for the community. It's why people are there. So always remember that. And third, I think it's just make the commitment. Put community building activities in your action plan for your event. Spend the time and the dollars to make this happen. And if you make it a commitment to do that, you follow through with that, then it's just going to become natural. And that's the state you want to get in. It's just a natural way that we do business. So making a commitment and having the faith that these activities will pay off in the long run.
Awesome. Great. Taylor, from your experience, can you share some tips for our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So loved everything that Craig said. One major thing I want to add on to that, and this kind of goes into the mindset shift and the taking the time and the space to slow down, is remember that your supporters are people. They're people just like you. They want connection. So when you're thinking about how to even start the outreach for a program like this, or how to build a community maybe around, like Craig said, something that you've already got, always keep it in the forefront of your mind to connect on a very human, personal, and one-to-one level. And then create that dialogue, that one-to-one dialogue amongst the other people who are starting to join the community. I mean, some practical things that you can do that we often do in working with organizations is, really kind of sit down and look at the behaviors of your supporters, whether someone is a volunteer or a donor or peer-to-peer participant. Like, try to figure out not just their demographic information when you're looking at, okay, well, who would we even invite into this community? But like, look at the behavioral information or data that you have on people, and then start to map out a plan for communication around whatever community this is that you want to build. So you're talking to the right people about the right thing and inviting the right people into the community. So those are just a couple of kind of practical things. And again, back to Craig's point about mindset, I think just think outside the box. Look at what you're already doing and look for opportunities within that, knowing that you have limited resources to say, hey, we're already doing this program. Is there a way to build an online forum or something like that to get people talking on a more one-to-one dialogue and creating that opportunity for interaction?
Fantastic. Thank you. So before we close out today, I wanted to give you guys just, an overview of what we talked about today and the importance of it. We talked so much about building a community and how crucial it is for nonprofit success, because these days, with the numerous amounts of nonprofits out there and all the new technologies and all the strategies, it all boils down to having a great community of supporters. And if you're not spending the time to reach out to them and connect with them and keep them loyal to your nonprofit, then they're ultimately going to find another nonprofit within the same area who's doing the same thing. So I really want to highlight the importance of that. And
Taylor, I liked what you just said just now about connecting with them on a very human and one-on-one level. I think that often gets lost in the conversation sometimes, where everything becomes so automated and so generic, that nonprofits don't realize that that's how it sounds to their donors. So I really, really appreciate that.
Well, that about wraps it up for today's episode. I want to thank our listeners for listening in on today's podcast. And Taylor, Craig, again, it's really been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on the Nonprofit Chatter and sharing your insights on building a community.
Yeah, it's been fun,
Absolutely.
Greg, thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed it and love talking about ways we can all do our jobs better.
And on behalf of Nonprofit Pro and Pursuant, we will see you on the next episode of the Nonprofit Chatter. Have a wonderful day.